Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting.
Hello, Robin. How you doing?
I am great today. How are you, Jackie?
I am doing good. I'm excited for our topic today. This is actually one of my favorites.
Yes, I think it can be so interesting in talking about communication and how we communicate. And I think it also can be frustrating sometimes, especially if we repeat patterns that we seem to not be able to interrupt and change, or we struggle with the awareness of when we're doing it. I agree. I think it's wonderful. I think it can be one of those more difficult things, although people talk about communication all the time.
Right. That's kind of the foundation for our level 3 in the workbook. And the theme for today is not only what you're communicating, but how you're communicating.
Yes. Effective.
Right. And it doesn't always look the same for every person. Some people are quick to speak and they can speak very eloquently and they know what to say. And I find others sometimes need a moment to really process and think and then respond. And it's interesting when you have an individual who is quicker to respond and you have one that is more quiet, that oftentimes we'll hear that the quiet individual says they really don't feel like they get a chance to speak or to chime in.
They're not heard. They're not given that opportunity, or people don't value their input. I think it's so important, especially in families, to be able to allow the other person to have a voice, and you can still disagree. That happens all the time. And in every relationship, we need to be able to hear what someone else is saying, but we may not agree with that, and that's okay.
Absolutely. When we're talking about families, we often say to parents, if your child seems like they're just walking away when you walk in the door, they're slamming the door, they're putting their earphones on the minute they see you, think about possibly what are you communicating and how? Because for some children, I know even after school, they will say they feel like they get in the car and the first thing is, how did the test go? What did you do? Were you good at school today? Or something to that nature. And kids will say they're instantly stressed as opposed to maybe communicating something like, how was your day? And I was guilty of this as a parent. I would have a tendency out of my own anxiety to maybe nag or say things repeatedly that I didn't need to. And I found that really when I wanted to communicate something, it was more powerful sometimes not to say anything at all and to wait and let some time pass and then come back and have a conversation.
Right. Yesterday, I was talking to a family and this topic came up, and the child was able to say to the parent, you often ask me, how did my anxiety go? Did I have anxiety? And just the way they bring it up, the child says, I feel like you're telling me I'm supposed to have anxiety. And sometimes I don't know if I have anxiety or I just feel stressed today.
Absolutely. And I think every child and every adult learns different. Some are more visual learners. Some are more auditory learners. We joke sometimes too that kids so often, they're really listening for about the first couple sentences. And then after that, they're tuning out.
Right.
If as a parent, you're one that does a lot of talking and kind of lecture, or you get very heightened in your tone, you'll notice for some children that they're just really tuning out and disconnecting. And so sometimes less is more, like we always say.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you get this, Jackie, when parents say, how do you get them to talk to you? Because I struggle to get them to talk to me. One of the things I will say is my questions often are open-ended, but I don't talk a lot. I don't do those leading questions. I don't talk from assumptions. I allow them to be able to express it in their own language and then try to understand and meet them there. And I think that's hard in parenting because parents know their kids better than anyone else. And they often can pick up on things that maybe even the child doesn't know. And that's a hard position to be in when you recognize recognize things and you want to identify it, you want to talk about it, you want to point it out. I think that can be hard sometimes in parenting.
Oh, absolutely. I would say most of us worry about our children. And so sometimes we see things or we want to remind or we want to point out or we want to teach. But for a lot of our children, that's not the best way they learn. And I think we'll have kids say to us, the more my parent reminds me, the less I want to do it. So it's almost like less motivating sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so just figuring out what does work. What are times where you communicate well with your child? What are times where you feel like the relationship is going well or experiences? And so often families will say when we're playing a game or we're going on a walk or we're not talking about responsibilities or school or what didn't go well. And so you definitely want to balance it, right? You want to have times where you're communicating about fun stuff, about the child's interests, about, what's going on, and not just those teaching moments per se.
I'm thinking, Jackie, as you were talking there, I think about on page 45, the traps that we talk about that we easily can get into. And we've talked about some of those, asking what is wrong. So there we're on that assuming position.
Mm-hmm.
That can easily happen. Asking those leading questions. I think that's something that you're really identifying in what you said there. And then being hyper vigilant to what's going on. Like you're so much on top of it. And it is due to our own anxiety, our own worries, our own kind of things that impact us. I think that can happen, and recognizing that when those happen, that's not always easy, but I think it is something that if we can work on, and I always try to encourage people to set an intention for the day. If I know I struggle in this area, that I can be hyper vigilant on something, or I can ask those leading questions. Okay, my intention today is being more mindful and thoughtful of that. It doesn't mean it's completely the other way, but it allows me to try to be in that space in my parenting throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes for a little bit more of a calm setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually really like the communication traps because I think for me, it's helpful. And when I have discussions with families, the teenagers and even the younger children love pointing out different communication traps and those that are maybe not so helpful. And it helps the parents to hear from the children, when you say this is kind of what I'm hearing. And so often parents are like, that's not what I intended. That's not what I meant. But it's interesting when you hear what the interpretation is and what the child is experiencing.
Yeah. The one that I try to do is tell me something that went well today, or I use tell me something that you found difficult and how you managed the difficulty. And that doesn't mean that it went well, but how did you handle that? And I ask my grandchildren that often. And so now, if they see me after school, that's one of the first things. I did this and this, and now this, because they know what I'm about to ask. But I think it is interesting to help them to reflect on their day in a way that's not just so black and white, which children can be, right? This happened and it was horrible, terrible. And if we can help point out some things that may have happened that was difficult, and they managed it, or something that they did well, it may feel really good to them.
100%. And I think that it's even just having the conversation of having everyone recognize that, both positive and difficult things can happen in a day, both things that went well and things that are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I love the avoid labeling. Avoid, you look anxious. Did you have anxiety today? This child's just really shy, so they can't talk to others, or this child is very fragile, really can't handle a lot. We talk a lot about that as a communication trap, because when we're assigning a label to our child like that, so often we respond out of that. So if I feel like my child is very anxious, I might be more prone to hover or to take care of them more than I would another child that I see as more resilient. And so our communication can impact how we see a child and vice versa. If we see a child as very defiant, we may right away be on edge and communicate that to them. So a lot of meaning is relayed through our communication.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. On page 50, we have a list of tips to be more purposeful in our communication. We also talk about being effective and using effective language. And that's what this level is all about, of if I'm wanting to achieve this goal, and I'm wanting to be in a certain position of helping my child to develop resilience or independence or whatever it may be, does the language align to what that goal is and what we in our family think is really important? And I really like avoid saying it will be a great day. I'm careful of trying to, make them feel better by guaranteeing them that it's going to be a great day, because I don't know, it may not. And I think that can really set up for families a lot of frustration for the child. Oh, you said it was going to be great. And look, it was a horrible day. And then you get into that argument after school about if it was a good day or not. That is one of those that I really try to practice.
I agree. I like that one too a lot. We all make mistakes with communication in terms of our intent or in terms of what we're hoping for. And I think, as we always say, not being hard on ourselves, but really trying to look towards what communication really is effective in our family. Every child is different. Mm-hmm. We talk about often. And so different types of communication work with different children. And you might even have a significant other or a spouse, and you recognize that there's a lot of butting heads in the evening, or maybe, you find that it gets escalated to yelling and things quickly kind of unravel. And really, I think so often as the adults in the home, we model for our kids on how to communicate. So just thinking about what are better ways that we can communicate and what are ways that we can teach our children through our communication, things like regulating emotions and active listening. And so as we work towards more helpful communication or more effective communication, I think it really does bring together closeness within the family.
I would completely agree. If you look on page 50, Jackie, that tips for purposeful communication, which one would you pick out? I think I know which one you would like.
I like so many.
Yeah. There's one that stands out. I feel like you talk about a lot.
I think the one that I talk a lot about, what do you think you could do? Because I think so many of the kids I work with, or the children or parents I work with, they will start to describe a situation or talk about a struggle. And I so often want to just jump in and give them advice. But I find that so often it's more powerful when it comes from them. And so I like to say, what do you think you could do in that situation next time? Or what have you done in the past that's worked? And that's number 2 on the list.
Yes.
And when I share that with families, they really say it can be a game changer when they start using it. And sometimes teenagers in particular will get frustrated with that question, but once you use it consistently and really take some time to let some time go and let a moment of pause. So you're not just saying it and rushing right in with, giving advice, but what do you think you can do, and allowing some just quiet, letting the child really come up with some ideas will be far more powerful than giving them suggestions.
I agree. And I like what you said about that, is giving the pause and allowing them to absorb so that they could come up with it, because it does empower them. It does allow them in their own voice. And any of these tips that we're giving listeners, one of the things we do encourage is that you use your language that matches you. We may say something such, what do you think you could do? For you, there may be different language in the same meaning that you would use. And so don't try to parrot us. Make it really about, in your language, how would you say that? What would be an effective way to align with that meaning in that question? Well, Jackie, I think we're at the end of our episode today. Listeners, remember, at the end of each level, you're able to do a summary. We have some reflective questions throughout each level so that you can work on it. So if you don't have that book, jump on Amazon and order the Successful Parenting Workbook.
Yes, thank you. And hopefully everybody has a great week, and we'll dive into level 4 next time.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.